Hello, Austin. Welcome to Lone Star Politics right here on KVRX. I'm your host, Dr. Love. Today we are talking about what I think will go down in history as one of the most important public health issues of the 21st century. Before we go into that, I'd like to ask you, should local government be adding medicine to our drinking water supply? A lot of Americans out there are drinking water that has had fluoride artificially added to it. The reason fluoride is added to water is to improve our dental health and reduce cavity rates. But the problem is that this medicine is being added to the water, so there's no way to determine if you're getting enough fluoride or if you're getting too much. There's no way to regulate the dosage when the medicine is added to the drinking water supply. Right now, there's an epidemic in the United States. It is called dental fluorosis, and it affects 40% of adolescents in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control. Dental fluorosis is a white or brown spotting or mottling of the teeth. The only cause of dental fluorosis is ingestion of fluoride during tooth development. So our teeth are made of calcium. During tooth development, when fluoride is ingested, the body will take this highly reactive ion, the fluoride ion, and incorporate that into the tooth so it will bind with the calcium in the tooth. The problem with this is that our teeth are not supposed to be made of fluoride. They're supposed to be made of calcium. So when there's too much fluoride in our teeth, we get these white and brown streaks that some people find to be, a cosmetic defect. But more importantly, it makes the teeth more brittle and more likely to break. Thankfully, policymakers are starting to pay attention to the negative health effects of water fluoridation. Here's an NBC News clip about the potential dangers of artificial water fluoridation and what Tennessee lawmakers are doing about it.
We have been fluoridating our water in Tennessee for more than 50 years, but never before has there been more talk that fluoridating our water might be a bad idea and a health risk. Tonight, Dennis Ferrier has the latest developments on a story that impacts all of us.
Joey Hensley is a respected physician. He's also a Tennessee state lawmaker. He is now combining those two professions to make a very strong point.
We've been doing it 50 years, but just because we've been doing something 50 years doesn't necessarily mean that it's right.
Hensley's talking about something most of us don't even think about, fluoridating water. After much research, the doctor has sent out a letter to every water district in Tennessee asking them to stop fluoridating water. The evidence, he says, fluoride works better when you rub it on your teeth, not when you drink it. That fluoridation is medication added to water without your permission, and that's wrong. But most of all, because the National Research Council believes young children are getting 3 to 4 times the dose of fluoride as adults. And now the American Dental Association is telling mothers not to make baby formula with fluoridated water because of fear of dental fluorosis.
And that's big news, and that really hasn't been publicized very much.
Health researcher Dan Stockin believes that this ADA warning about baby formula and fluoride is just the beginning.
The ramifications of this are so huge. I'm sure that the state health department hasn't quite figured it out yet. Because see, once the door cracks, and it is now for what it does to teeth, the next group, one of the next groups that's going to start raising their hands and saying, what about us, is people who are on dialysis and people who have borderline kidney damage and impairment. Then there's all the people that have hypothyroidism.
Scientists like Nobel Prize winner Arvid Carlson and a large group of EPA scientists have called for the banning of fluoride because we don't know how much we're ingesting, so we don't know if we're being poisoned.
There are so many potential legal things about to happen that as a taxpayer, I think it would be really, really smart for the water districts and the Metro Nashville. Look, just if people want fluoride, let them use fluoridated toothpaste and spit it out. But don't go poisoning everyone. Don't continue this after everyone knows all this information now, just because it's not convenient.
Dr. Hensley has already had one response. Spring City in Ray County is going to stop fluoridating its water. And it is that simple. I mean, there's no law. It's all voluntary, Dan, so anyone can turn on the fluoride or turn it off.
Dennis, let's make sure we're clear on this. Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste, but it's actually a poison, right?
It sure is, and here's the quickest evidence. Go to your bathroom and pick up your toothpaste, and you'll see a warning that if a child swallows more than a pea-sized amount of toothpaste, call poison control.
Water fluoridation is not just an issue in Tennessee. It is a huge issue in Austin. Well, here's a little background. In December of 2009, the Environmental Board to Austin City Council made a recommendation to City Council for them to investigate the potential health consequences of fluoridation as well as the environmental consequences. That recommendation was based upon expert testimony the Environmental Board heard from Austin residents about the dangers associated with fluoridation. City Council did nothing. In June of 2010, about 6 months after the Environmental Board recommendation, Austin Health and Human Services put up a warning on their website telling mothers that if they used tap water for baby formula, that their child would be more likely to develop dental fluorosis. In November of 2010, Dr. Paul Connett, the world's leading expert in water fluoridation, came to Austin to testify before City Council about the health dangers that water fluoridation poses. He also met with some of City Council's staff to discuss more specifically the dangers associated with fluoridation. Yet still, City Council did nothing. But in February of 2011, the federal government came out with a statement about fluoride that was really shocking to everyone in the anti-fluoridation community. And here is what they said.
Most of us grew up with the idea that more fluoride meant better teeth. And health officials believe that putting fluoride in water is one of the top 10 public health accomplishments of the last century. But new studies now say that too much fluoride is damaging the teeth of more than 1 in 3 teens. So for the first time in nearly 50 years, the federal government is reversing course and recommending less fluoride in water. Here's Ron Claiborne.
Ever since the 1940s, fluoride has been artificially added to drinking water to help fight tooth decay. It's been credited with reducing cavities by up to 50%. But even then, there were critics who complained about injecting a chemical into drinking water, a view satirized in the 1960s movie Dr. Strangelove.
Do you realize that fluoridation is the most monstrously conceived and dangerous communist plot we have ever had to face?
But today, the federal government called for reducing the amount of fluoride in water to protect children from a tooth disease called fluorosis, which stains and even erodes teeth. It affects as many as a third of American children.
Making this adjustment now will promote public health, improve oral health, and reduce rates of fluorosis.
There's a twinkle in your eye when there's fluoride for their teeth.
For years, fluoride has been added to toothpaste and is in other products we eat and drink. The government says Americans are now ingesting too much fluoride. Its new recommendation, no more than 0.7 milligrams of fluoride for every liter of drinking water, down from 1.2 milligrams a liter. Cities such as New York, Chicago, and Minneapolis, and many others whose water has higher amounts of fluoride would have to reduce them to meet the new target. Dr. Griffin of Austin, Texas, says he has treated some severe cases of fluorosis in children.
The teeth become brittle, become weak, and you have to treat them with either crowns or new facings, and it can be very costly.
Critics say fluoride can cause greater damage than just brittle teeth. Even the National Research Council, whose 2006 report was cited today by the EPA, linked it to bone damage and increased risk of fractures. The government says there's no evidence fluoride causes serious illness. The only concern for now, the potentially serious damage to children's teeth.
The dentist you saw there was Dr. Griffin Cole from right here in Austin, Texas. And we are privileged to have Dr. Cole in the studio with us today. I must say that it is really cool to have the one dentist that ABC News selected for a national news clip about water fluoridation right here on the show. Dr. Cole, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your history in dentistry and what got you involved in the issue of water fluoridation?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Well, I graduated in '93, so 18 years ago, and I was taught, like every other dentist, that fluoride is the panacea, that it's the only way to have true sound oral health. So I actually, Rob, I don't know if you listen up, but for 6 months in practice, I promoted it. I mean, I thought it was a great thing, and that's what I was taught. And fortunately, I very quickly started looking at the literature and realized the error of my ways, and so I stopped promoting it. I stopped recommending it, and it's grown from there. And really, it's grown because of just, if you look at the literature, look at the true science out there, it's just not even a question anymore. I mean, it's not. It hasn't done what it was intended to do, which was to fight decay. We still have the same decay rates that we had 50 years ago, as you mentioned. And we've learned now through a lot of science, especially over the past decade, that there's a lot of serious negative effects that happen in the body. So we're at the point now where I think, this lowering of the level from 1.2 to 0.7 is a start, but it's just not enough.
When you were in dental school, was the mantra, water fluoridation is safe and effective, was that hammered into your brain?
It was, and in fact, I went to school in San Antonio, and at the time, they were not fluoridated. They kept fighting this. Whenever it came up for a vote, it was always voted down, which I thought was a bad thing because I was told, we're the only major city that's not fluoridated. Us in San Diego, this is nuts. And so when I was there, and I grew up in San Antonio, thank God, because no fluoride in the water, but it wasn't fluoridated. It's now been fluoridated for about 8 years. And incidentally, on that note, I went down to fight that when that was happening. I was on the anti side, and nobody showed up for the pro side. I mean, we had all these things set up with local radio DJs. It was going to be these whole debates, and nobody ever showed up on the side.
So when you went down to San Antonio to offer your professional opinion on whether fluoride should be added to the drinking water of San Antonio, those experts that supported adding fluoride to the drinking water, they didn't even bother showing up to the debate. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of how fluoridation got started in the United States?
It was it's an interesting story because back in the late 30s, early 40s, there was a town in Colorado, I think it was Colorado Springs, where they had a high naturally occurring fluoride, and they noticed brown stains on the teeth of all their citizens. So, but at the same time, they also knew that there was a low decay rate in that city as compared to other Colorado cities. So they started doing some homework and said, gosh, what's causing these stains? They found that it was fluoride, and they said, gosh, this must fight decay.
So fluoride is causing stains on teeth, and they somehow reached the conclusion, therefore fluoride is fighting cavities?
Well, because there was a lower decay rate in that particular town. Now, Rob, they never looked at diet, genes, health history, none of that stuff.
Brushing technique?
Yeah, none of that was looked at.
Income?
None of that, none of that.
So this is another example of correlation does not equal causation. They find two things that are related. Even though bad teeth was related to this, stains are related to fluoridation, yet they still move forward and say, oh, fluoridation fights decay.
That's right, that's right.
That's amazing.
And then, in 1945, they decided to do a test of this. And so they compared two cities in Michigan. It was Grand Rapids, which was fluoridated, against Muskegon, which was not. And they started this study that was supposed to be a 5-year study. And they started looking at, after a couple years, they said, it seems like there is less decay in Grand Rapids, therefore it works. And they ended the study, and that was it. So it wasn't even a full study. They never actually got to the point where they looked at it, and again, looked at other factors. So that was it. And then, of course, the famous Harold Hodge became the spokesperson for this, and there's all these films of him showing that at 1 part per million.
Who is Harold Hodge? Can you tell us a little bit about him?
Harold Hodge is most well known for being in charge of the Manhattan Project, which of course was the whole making of the bomb, and he was in charge of getting the actual enrichment of the uranium, and you had to use a certain ingredient to make that happen properly, and it was fluoride.
Stay tuned to learn more about how fluoride is related to the nuclear bomb.